All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. We have Nick again talking about the war and a bunch of other stuff, so let's get straight into it.
I do want to move on. I want to get into our war with Iran. This is a little bit about where we are. I do want to get into our war with Iran. We've got some big developments for you tonight. And where we left off, we are in a stalemate in the war with Iran. Week number 5 is starting. We have been in this war now for exactly 4 weeks, and there is no end in sight. It is a true catastrophe. And we've talked a lot about why that is. The United States and Israel have engaged Iran in a joint operation using only air and sea power. They were hoping for a quick and decisive strike so overwhelming that it would topple the regime, that the masses of Iranians would rise up and change their government. And this is what the U.S. and Israel, maybe more so the United States, was counting on. But that's not what happened. The Iranian regime has proved to be resilient. And although we killed its leader and much of its leadership, although we have crippled its military and we've bombed them almost 10,000 times, the Iranian regime remains intact. And remaining intact, they still retain the capability to launch drones and missiles at the Gulf Cooperation Council nations, at U.S. military bases, at Israel, and maybe most importantly, at shipping that transits through the Strait of Hormuz. So the United States is effectively unable to achieve its strategic objectives. If its strategic objective was to quickly and decisively collapse the Iranian regime, that goal now appears to be out of reach. However, we have initiated hostilities, Iran has retaliated, and they have changed the dynamic of how the region works. By closing the strait, they have effectively seized control of the global energy market. 20% of the world's energy that transits by ship goes through the strait, and Iran is effectively controlling it via a toll. It is a drone-enforced tollway. And the countries that are allied with Iran have safe passage. And Iran's oil itself is able to be exported. And nations that are willing to pay a $2 million toll, they're able to get their goods through the strait as well. But countries that are antagonistic towards Iran, countries at war with Iran or allied with those at war with Iran, they are being attacked. And so the conflict has settled into an attritional war, where the United States is unable to complete its objectives. Meanwhile, in open hostilities, Iran is choking off the supply of global energy, which is badly hurting the U.S. economy, our allies in the Indo-Pacific, and the economy of Europe. So Trump is faced with a couple of options. He can escalate the war and how the war is being fought to ultimately achieve his objectives. He can, in some way or another, with an invading ground force, with a nuclear strike, those seem to be the only options. He can escalate the tactics and the fighting to ultimately achieve his aims, which is a regime change. They will be able then to suppress Iran's ability to attack the strait, and the war will be won. The alternative is he can de-escalate by achieving a ceasefire or a truce. He can get Iran to stop choking off the strait through diplomacy, and this would be considered a tactical retreat and ultimately a strategic victory for Iran. He doesn't want to do either of these things. These are two bad options. If we withdraw, if we surrender, Iran is going to be able to extract concessions, and they will have won. If we escalate, the means by which we do so would be unacceptable. Politically, geopolitically, can't use a nuclear weapon, unprecedented, can't invade, too many casualties, not enough political capital, no morale, appetite for that domestically. So Trump is trying to find a third way out of the conflict, and we've been talking about this. It seems that he had no plan B. If he doesn't succeed and Iran closes the strait, what's the exit plan? He doesn't seem to have one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems like we started this war with Iran while we were still trying to figure out what the actual plan is if things don't go our way. I think part of it is maybe the administration was a little bit hyped up on adrenaline after the Maduro raid. Following that, I think there's this misconception that a couple of bombs can get the job done. But remember, we've been bombing countries in the Middle East for decades, right? And it does not work, right? Because there's a religious aspect tied to these countries, okay? There's an ideology tied to them. And so bombing them isn't going to make them come to our side, right? Diplomacy would work, but we've kind of burned that bridge already by starting this war. Also, people forget that if you start a ground invasion, I feel like Trump's going to have to answer to that later on down the road, right? Because typically to declare war, you need that approval, right, from the government. But in our case, we've started this war in Iran without that approval. And if too many soldiers die, or if too much conflict goes on, if too much is spent or lost on this war, I think that there may be some repercussions for the administration after the fact, right? I'm not sure about that. I know there's some protections. There's a lot of protections, actually, but I do worry that after this is all said and done, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have to answer and pay for what they've done in this conflict.
And so as the days and weeks go by, this attritional war is hurting the U.S. economy. Oil prices are higher than ever. Stock market is having another very bad week. S&P 500 is down 500 points at close earlier tonight. As all of this economic pain is setting in, Trump is trying to figure out a third way, a way to escalate the conflict, maybe not achieving total victory, but a decisive blow, a tactical victory that brings Iran to the negotiating table so that we can achieve favorable terms for a withdrawal with dignity, a face-saving tactical retreat with honor. That seems to be the play. And how he's decided to do this is to engage Iran's energy industry in a very tactful way. So far, that seems to be the elephant in the room. The only way to hurt Iran any further without actually invading Iran, we seem to be doing as much as we can with air and sea power, dropping bombs from above, launching missiles from ships. It seems that the only other way we can escalate short of a ground invasion is to begin targeting Iran's energy infrastructure, which we have avoided doing so far. And we've talked about why that is. In an attritional war, the way that Iran hurts us and uses leverage against us is by raising the price of energy, by constraining its supply. Well, if we bomb Iran's energy, that only constrains the energy supply further. We take Iran's oil out of the global market, it reduces global supply, and the price goes up further. What's more, Iran will retaliate, and they will likely retaliate against energy infrastructure on the other side of the Persian Gulf, in Saudi Arabia and Qatar in particular. That will compound the effects. So you will take Iran's energy out of the market, and then Iran will take Saudi oil and Qatari LNG off the market. So it actually worsens the problem of the attritional war. And it may not even then bring Iran to the negotiating table anyway, because their regime will be intact, they'll be badly damaged, but we will be too. So it seems that Trump is trying to circumscribe how he's going to approach energy. He's finding a third way. And the third way appears to be not destroying Iran's energy infrastructure, but taking control over it. And so he's fixated on this small island called Karg Island, as you know, in the Persian Gulf. And although the oil is extracted and refined on the coastline of Iran's mainland, the actual oil is pumped out via pipeline to the island, 95% of it, where it is then loaded onto a ship and then exported. And so that seems to be the critical choke point for Iran's entire energy industry, which accounts for half of its exports. 95% of the oil, and the oil is 50% of Iran's exports. So Trump believes that he doesn't necessarily have to destroy Iran's energy infrastructure. If he can seize control over it, he can take it hostage and then use that as a counterweight to how Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. So to that end, 2 weeks ago, he bombed Karg Island, bombed its military assets. Not their energy infrastructure, but just the military assets protecting the island. In the ensuing 2 weeks, it seems that he's building up a military force to take over that island. Invading Iran on the mainland would be almost impossible because of the terrain, the size of Iran's armed forces, the scale of its missile and drone stockpile. If we tried to invade Iran's mainland, it might be a suicide mission. But if we can target this 8 square mile island, if we can use air power and electronic warfare and other means to shut down that island, shut down that zone, and put a military presence on it, then we can seize control of Iran's energy infrastructure without destroying it. We can say that that is a decisive victory. We can call that a tactical objective. That gives us the morale. That gives us, you could say, the political capital to leave the war with dignity, and it's a huge bargaining chip that we can use to extract concessions. We will release your oil if you release ours. If you release the Strait of Hormuz, we will release Karg Island back to you. That seems to be the play.
I could see that angle and how the administration would want to approach that tactic. The only pushback I have is that this assumes that Iran approaches or reacts to that with a level of rationale that I don't think we're going to see. I think Iran is essentially saying, all or nothing, right? We don't want to negotiate. They've already told us that the statement that Trump made about negotiations was a lie because they haven't talked to anybody and there's no ongoing negotiations. I don't think they want to negotiate. I think they're tired of America's involvement in Iran. And I think they want their sovereignty back, right? And you might be like, oh, well, they already have their sovereignty, but we keep trying to have our fingers in all these countries and influence all these nations in the Middle East. And I think Iran isn't putting up with it, right? Now, look, I'm a veteran. I'm a patriot. I love America. But I think that this part of America is the bad look that we have around the globe, right? This aspect to our country is one of the bad things about the US, that we always try to influence other nations. And if we can't influence it using democracy and diplomacy, we try to influence it using military strength and bullying. And I think that that's not going to work out in this instance.
Now, in the meantime, the United States does not want Iran to know that this is coming, that this is happening. And maybe more importantly, Trump does not want the stock market to know that this is happening. This is an attritional war. It's an economic war. And part of the economic war, it's not just about the actual scarcity of the commodities involved, which is oil, natural gas, fertilizer, aluminum, other things. It's also about perception. And so the demand for these commodities and how they value them in the present is dependent upon how people perceive the flow of the conflict. If they think the war is going to go on for a long time, and if they think this energy crunch is not going to end anytime soon, it makes the economic problems much more acute right now. If they think, however, that everything is going according to plan, and the war is going to be over any day, and that there's going to be an influx of oil next week or in 2 weeks, then without all the panic, it makes the economic problems less severe. So it seems that simultaneously, Trump is preparing the way for a major escalation in the conflict, an actual ground invasion, not of Iran's mainland, but of its islands. It's a huge risk, major gamble. There's a big risk of American lives. And it seems that that might be the only way out. That might be threading the needle between a disgraceful retreat, which gives Iran a strategic victory, and an unacceptable escalation. At the same time that he's preparing for this, he has to reassure the markets that this is not about to happen. And so that brings us to this past weekend and where we left off on Tuesday. Last weekend, Trump made a big ultimatum. Trump said on Saturday that if Iran does not open the Strait of Hormuz and end the war in 48 hours, then Trump would begin targeting Iran's power plants and its energy grid. Iran immediately replied, predictably, and they said in the event that that happens, Iran will then target all civilian infrastructure in the Gulf countries. And that's Qatar, that's the United Arab Emirates, that's Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. And Iran said not only will we attack their energy, their LNG, their liquefied natural gas, their oil, but will also attack their desalination plants, which they rely on for drinking water. Will also attack their hotels, airports. Will attack all their civilian infrastructure will be on the table. And in response to this news, everything on the market tanked. Gold, Bitcoin, stock market. This would be an apocalyptic conflict for the economy. Not just for oil and natural gas, but for everything. This would seriously tank the economy. So then before the markets opened on Monday, Trump said the deadline was extended by 5 days because Trump said that he was going to give Iran an opportunity to make a deal, that there was going to be this peace process, and he was going to give them an opportunity to find a diplomatic way out of the conflict. And so he was extending the deadline. The news from today and this week is that on Wednesday, Trump said the deadline is extended another 10 days. And so whereas the deadline was supposed to expire today or tomorrow, now the deadline expires not on Monday, but the following Monday. And Trump said that he has made this decision because the peace process is underway and Iran wants to make a deal, and they've actually agreed in principle to many points of contention in the conflict. And this is a story about that extension. This is from the Wall Street Journal. It says, quote, President Trump said earlier on Thursday that he was pausing strikes on Iran's energy sector for more than 10 days until April 6th so that peace negotiations can take place. Trump's previous deadline was Friday. He said the extension was at Iran's request. Iran has not requested a 10-day pause and has yet to deliver a final response to a 15-point plan to end the war, according to mediators in the peace talks. Iranian officials have told the mediators that they are interested in negotiations, but the country's leadership has yet to weigh in and give a final decision. The U.S. offered a 15-point plan that essentially would swap an end to crippling sanctions for Iranian concessions on every point of conflict, including its nuclear and missile programs and support for regional militias. Iranian officials already have demanded that the U.S. scale back its excessive demands outlined in the 15-point plan before it agrees to meet to discuss a potential ceasefire. They also ruled out discussing Iran's missile program as a starting point for the talks, and they do not want to commit to ending enrichment of uranium forever. The odds of success for a ceasefire remain low, with Iran and the United States staking out maximalist demands that are unacceptable to each other side, said the mediators. So this is where we are, and this kind of catches us up from where we are before. Like I said, you've got the state of the conflict, which we're all very familiar with at this point. We're stuck here, and this has been described variously as an escalation trap. There's a lot of talk about the escalation ladder, escalation dominance, the escalation trap. You have to understand there's sort of a logic to how conflict works. There's a political dimension to how conflict works. And what I mean by that is, for example, we go in really heavy when the war starts 4 weeks ago. We blow up Iran, we blow up their leadership, we assassinate their supreme leader or half their military and civilian leadership, we sink their navy, destroy their whole country. In retaliation, they close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, we made and took a shot to kill Iran. We went for the jugular. Make no mistake about it. This was intended to be the killing blow. This was not a nicky-knack surgical strike, wasn't a tactical hit. This was a definitive, decisive killing blow, or at least intended to be. And when they say decisive, decision to cut, to come down, they mean we're going to topple the regime. It's going to be decisive. On the other side of this blow, there's going to be a different regime. And it failed. Now that it failed, Iran has done the only thing that they can, which is to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, and this is the problem that we're in, we're realizing we can't finish the job now. We took our shot, we missed, and now it's going to be impossible to do what we initially set out to accomplish. And why is that? Because when you try to strike a killing blow, it actually has a rally around the flag effect. We killed the symbol of their regime. And so what this does is it emboldens everybody in the regime. All the hardliners, all the people that said not to trust the United States, all the people that really believe death to America, really believe in the Shiite eschatology, they're now in control. And if they weren't true believers before, they are now. So they're dug in and they're entrenched because they are facing an existential danger. We want regime change. They are the regime.
Think about it in context of 9/11, right? So whenever that happened, it didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. Everybody rallied behind the flag and they wanted vengeance, right? They wanted action and a response to those events, right? So it's the same thing here. You know, it doesn't matter if you guys have bickering within your country, if there's a lot of unrest within the nation. Once an external force comes in and starts blowing up facilities, and you're, listening to bombs go off in the night like it's the 4th of July every day, you're eventually going to rally around the flag and say, hey, I know we have problems, but you guys bombing us isn't helping. And so instead of supporting you guys, I'm going to support my countrymen in order to put an end to this conflict. So it's the same principle.
We're carrying out regime change with assassination strikes. We're literally threatening to murder all of them. So this is now about survival. This is not a negotiation, war as politics by other means. For them, this is now existential. Their literal backs as human beings are up against a wall. They're facing certain death. So they have to win or they die. A regime that has to win or die does not negotiate. They're not going to meet in Pakistan. They're not going to hang out and talk about concessions, at least not right away. They want to guarantee their own survival. And so what they've done in response to this is close the Strait of Hormuz, and they have let it rain on the Gulf countries. They're now inflicting the maximum amount of pain. Why? Why did they have to inflict the maximum amount of pain? Why did they have to take these steps? Bombing the Emirates 1,000 times, bombing Saudi Arabia, closing the strait, in many ways turning other countries against them. They have to do this to reestablish deterrence. They have to do this, in a word, so that the United States doesn't try to kill them again. The United States tried to kill them, they failed. They can't succeed now. Because with all the air and sea power, they're not going to defeat all the 200,000 Iranian Guard Corps. They're not going to incite an uprising. Not going to be able to defeat every guy with a gun that is in control of the infrastructure and institutions of Iran. So now these people that have just survived the killing shot, they have to make sure that the United States can never attack again. How do you do that? Impose the heaviest cost possible. And because Iran does not have strategic weapons that can hit the United States, they have to do it in other ways. They have to act like a porcupine as a weaker adversary. And they have to make it as painful as possible for everybody. They have to make it a drag. They have to make it unpleasant and painful so that when the United States backs off, unable to achieve its goals, it thinks twice before they try to kill Iran again. They have to inflict the maximum amount of damage. But now the United States they're also in a bit of a bind. They also have to make a certain type of decision here. So we tried to attack Iran, we failed. If we now retreat and Iran reestablishes deterrence, then we look weak by comparison. And then other countries that we are actually holding in suspended animation right now by the threat of force, they don't take us as seriously. Maybe they start to do aggressive things. Maybe they start to do things. In other words, I'll give you an example. The reason that China won't invade Taiwan is they think that we will defend it, and they think that because we have deterred China from intervening. Our threat of force is credible. If they invade Taiwan, you're in a war with the United States. It's a threat of force that is credible, that is strong. You don't want to mess with us. North Korea has a nuclear arsenal. They have some ambitions of their own. Maybe they don't pursue regional ambitions for the same reason. And the same is true of other regimes in the world. The moment that the United States retreats, everybody else recognizes the calculation has changed.
And this is why I say it's a bad play for the US to be only massive military on our side, right? When you look at NATO and you look at all these other countries, it's so bad that the US is the one, not really, I guess you could say footing the bill, but providing security for everybody. I think it's really important that other countries provide security for their regions and act as the main force that secures their region and creates deterrence from a lot of these regimes, right? Like South Korea should be the main one creating deterrence for North Korea, right? They shouldn't have to rely on us to secure their protection. And so I agree with him here. You know, we've held this policy of deterrence for so long, but right now we're kind of squandering that deterrence by starting this war in Iran, especially because we don't have a clear way out. And this might be another quote unquote forever war.
And what we calculated to be the threat of U.S. intervention might be less than it was before. And now they recalibrate their foreign policy, their security policy, to be maybe more aggressive, more risk-taking. Maybe they're going to test the United States, push the boundaries. As a superpower, as a world hegemon, the United States really can't afford that. And so we're sort of trapped in this situation where we don't have a lot of good options. We can't really leave here. We have to win by any cost. And what that means is there is no off-ramp. There's no way to de-escalate this without catastrophic knock-on effects for U.S. deterrence on a global level in every region. So we have to achieve some kind of credible victory. Maybe not a total victory, but a credible one. And the only way to achieve a credible victory at this point is to escalate the fighting. And this is why we say all the time, the United States is being drawn into the fight. We're not going willingly. Nobody said 10 years ago, we need a ground war in Iran. We need to decapitate Iran, and then we need a ground war, and then we need to send in troops to seize all the radioactive material. We were drawn into it step by step, working our way up the escalation ladder, killing Soleimani, ripping up the nuclear deal, calling their paramilitary a terrorist group, then authorizing cyber attacks, assassination strikes against their nuclear scientists, shooting down their missiles over Israel, going to war with their proxies, bombing their nuclear sites. And then one day you find yourself in a situation where we go for it, try to cut the head off the snake in an air campaign, and it doesn't work. And then all of a sudden, the unthinkable becomes the inevitable. All of a sudden, the only option left on the table, how do we finally get these guys? Because they just won't quit. The only option left on the escalation ladder is ground invasion or nukes. Ground invasion of some sort or nukes. We've thrown everything at this country. And it started with soft power, and then it was smart, hard power. Now it's just raw hard power. We've thrown everything at them. Maximum pressure sanctions. We have condemned them in the UN. We got together an international regime of sanctions. Again, sanction their proxies, their institutions, their leaders. Okay, then we killed the leader of their paramilitary, called it a terrorist group, shot down did everything step by step, walking up that ladder until we did everything shy of invasion and nukes 4 weeks ago because we bombed them 10,000 times. We did everything, all of our standoff weapons, air power, sea power, Tomahawk missiles, some say bunker buster bombs, 5,000-pound bombs, 50,000-pound bombs. We're doing the most, doing everything. Killed their leader, literally killed their leader. They won't quit. So now, 2 options remaining. We can't get them to quit, can't win. How do we, the superpower, credibility and deterrence on the line against what should be a far weaker adversary, how do we finally pound them into submission? Ground invasion, nuclear weapons. This is where we are. So this is where the present calibration comes from. This is the present calculation, like we talked about. So we hit Iran very hard in the opening weeks. They don't buckle. They don't bend. They close the Strait of Hormuz. They've effectively seized control of global energy. This is a humiliating embarrassment to the United States because we couldn't achieve our objectives, and now they've taken control of the global economy, and we can't stop them. Why can we not take back control of the Strait of Hormuz? Because we can't stop them from launching drones and missiles. It's impossible. These weapon systems are too abundant, too mobile, too small. They're effective, they're too cheap. Iran is always making more of them, importing more of them, can launch them from anywhere, from a long distance, a short distance.
Remember, the U.S. has the biggest trouble. I don't think we've won a war that involved guerrilla warfare. Vietnam, Afghanistan, right? Guerrilla warfare is our kryptonite. And Iran is willing to play that same game and enact that same playbook if we decide that we want to take it further and escalate. So it's a lose-lose equation here.
Tethered to a fiber optic cable or using radio, they can always launch drones. The Strait of Hormuz is 10, 20 miles wide at its narrowest stretch. So it is impossible for us to open up the strait. We are being humiliated and embarrassed, and we can't end the conflict on Iran's terms. We cannot end a conflict where the terms are dictated by a far weaker power. And we can't end the conflict. And the concession is that Iran took control of the strait and retained control of the strait. We went for a decisive killing blow, and they came out expanding their territory and power. They came out not only surviving, but better off. And understand that would be the result. We killed their leader, dropped 10,000 bombs, sank their navy, and somehow they expanded their control. Now they control one of the single most important choke points in international trade. Unacceptable. So Trump is left with one option: escalate to de-escalate. Escalate to achieve a favorable peace on our terms. And that is the only conversation that is legitimate here. This was determined, maybe you could say a week into the conflict, that this was going to happen. And so, like I said, this is my take on what is happening. Trump has effectively resolved that if he cannot topple the regime, and again, that became very clear within the first or second week, if Trump cannot quickly topple the regime, and if Iran will not open up the strait, and they're going to extract major concessions, even if they get a ceasefire, they're going to seize control of it, then Trump has a narrow lane to escalate the fighting, to achieve a tactical victory, to then maybe get a more favorable agreement, to get a truce, a ceasefire, and end the fighting. Maybe not forever, but at least for now. And Trump has calibrated that the only way to do that, we can't invade their country, we can't drop a tactical nuke on them. We're going to have to do some kind of surgical ground intervention on an island to take control of energy. And that's either going to be in the Persian Gulf or in the Strait of Hormuz. And it's going to be an island. And so what he did 2 weeks ago, like we talked about, I believe this was on a Friday, he seized control, or rather, he used an airstrike to bomb the military assets on Karg Island. And what that did is it rendered Karg Island vulnerable for an invasion. Karg Island, again, it's that energy hub. It has all their oil infrastructure for exporting their energy products. But in the north of the island is where they have a military airstrip, and they have a radar system, and they have an anti-air system. Trump bombed all of that, took it all offline. And then he came back the following week, if you remember, I believe this was last Tuesday or Wednesday, and Trump said, we're not going to do any attacks on Iran's energy, reassuring the markets, maybe even reassuring Iran. Then there's talk of diplomacy the next day. They say that Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey are trying to get a peace deal together. The following weekend, after the Karg Island attack, Trump makes his big 48-hour ultimatum and says, if you don't open up the strait, then we're going to destroy your power plants and your power grid. Before the markets open, Trump calls it off, extends the deadline. The deadline approaches. Trump extends it again. And in the meantime, there's all this talk about diplomacy. They say there's a peace process. They say there's negotiations, intermediaries underway. They say that Iran is amenable to negotiations. They don't want to be public about it. They're not very trusting. All of this is happening in the background. Now, the current deadline extends until the following Monday. Over the past 2 weeks, so let's say Karg Island was 2 weeks ago. In the past 2 weeks and in the next 2 weeks until the next deadline, this is a 4-week stretch, you have seen actually a second military buildup in the Middle East. From the time that Trump bombed Kharg Island 2 weeks ago until the end of the next deadline on April 6th, Trump will have deployed another aircraft carrier into the region. He will have deployed an additional 20,000 troops, and that includes 5,000 Marines, 5,000 airborne, 10,000 other soldiers. There might be more on the way. And what all of that looks like is they're putting in place a small force package, not a big one, but maybe the biggest special forces operation that has ever been conducted, very logistically difficult, to seize one of the islands. They're putting all those pieces in place while there is a ruse, not just for Iran, but more so for the public and for the markets of peace talks. And under the cover of that story, they're building up a force posture to take over one of those islands. That's the only way that the United States is able to counterintuitively de-escalate the conflict, is to first escalate it. How do we know this? There's another story yesterday, about the size of the force package. Like I said earlier in the week, so far you've got 5,000 Marines. They will arrive in the Persian Gulf this weekend. You've got another 5,000 airborne troops that are on notice. They have an 18-hour window to deploy anywhere in the world. As of yesterday, the Pentagon reports there could be another 10,000 troops going into the region. This is from the Journal. It says, quote, "The Pentagon is looking at sending up to 10,000 additional ground troops to the Middle East to give President Trump more military options, even as he weighs peace talks with Tehran. The force, which would likely include infantry and armored vehicles, would be added to the roughly 5,000 Marines and thousands of paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division who have already been ordered to the region. It is unclear where precisely forces will go in the Middle East, but they will likely be within striking distance of Iran and Kharg Island, a crucial oil export hub off of Iran's coast. Trump has repeatedly said he will open the Strait of Hormuz with or without the help of U.S. allies." So it's a force package now of 20,000. It started with 2,200, now it's 20,000. We thought earlier in the war that you were only going to have one aircraft carrier in the region. You had two initially, the Abraham Lincoln and the Gerald Ford. As of last week, the Gerald Ford probably got hit by an Iranian missile. They said it was a fire in the laundry room. Now they're saying the damage is far more extensive. That carrier has been taken out of the picture. It's being repaired in Greece. Another carrier is being deployed to the region. A Marine Expeditionary Unit is being deployed. You got 3,000 to 5,000 paratroopers. And now they're saying 10,000 more ground forces. And what it seems like, and this is what everybody's reporting, it's not my idea. I did say it, though, right after Kharg Island was bombed. What everybody now is saying is that there's going to be a major ground operation. This is being reported by sources in the Pentagon. It's in all the major papers. There was a closed-door hearing of the Armed Forces Committee, and 3 Republicans left that meeting and said, "We are against a ground war," which seems to imply that they were briefed about future ground operations. Today, at the G7 summit in Europe, Marco Rubio told our allies we will be in a war with Iran for 2 to 4 more weeks. Well, what's in 2 weeks? Your April 6th deadline. So we'll be at war at least until that deadline. Well, if the deadline expires, then we're going to be at war for 2 more weeks after that. So all the evidence is pointing towards there's going to be a major ground operation to take back the island. Let's talk about that operation. How exactly is this going to work? The problem that we're facing, by the way, is that we can't open up the strait because the strait is this big. The Strait of Hormuz is like 8 miles across, 20 miles across at its narrowest point. And so Iran, they don't even have to be looking to shoot a drone from 100 miles inside the country and hit a ship going through the strait. It's also, there's 2 lanes. So you got ships going one way and the other way. It's a very narrow stretch. And then in terms of where they can actually sail, it's narrower than that. So Iran is dialed in. They've got it on lock. You can't get a commercial vessel or even a U.S. destroyer through the strait because it's that vulnerable. And it's vulnerable because Iran is a very big country with a big coastline, and they are launching drones and missiles from everywhere all the time. Some precise, some imprecise, but the target is so small they're going to hit it. Well, Karg Island is 8 square miles. So the island is not bigger than the narrowest point of the strait. If they could hit the strait, they could hit the island. And it's the same problem. Karg Island is not far from Iran's coastline. It's only, I think, 10 miles off the coast of Iran. I don't have all the precise measurements here, all the precise numbers. It's not far from Iran's coastline. So you have the same problem on the island that you have in the strait. If you can't sail a vessel through the strait without getting hit by drones and missiles, how are you going to land on an island without being hit by drones and missiles? So the plan seems to be that this amphibious assault force, the Marines, are going to land on the island and take the island. They're going to come under heavy fire from drones and missiles. They're prepared for that. The plan is to send in attack helicopters that are going to shoot down the drones, and they're going to move some of their anti-missile systems away from the other targets, the U.S. bases that have been destroyed, and those systems will be put in place to protect the island. So they will land, they will repair the runway of the airstrip, which was bombed by Trump. They're going to seize control of the military facilities, and they're going to prepare the way. The paratroopers will land on that airstrip, bringing reinforcements, bringing supplies, and then maybe those 10,000 or more other troops who will surely be deployed in Kuwait or at hotels and bases elsewhere in the Gulf, then they will be reinforcing, and a logistics supply chain will be established, and they will control the island. They will be there for a prolonged occupation. But again, if we can't shoot down all the drones and missiles in the strait, how are we going to have a 100% success rate on the island? If we can't shoot them down in Doha and Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Riyadh, how are we going to get them on Karg Island? Do you understand that Iran has destroyed at least 13 bases? The Pentagon is lying to us. Iran hit the Gerald Ford and took it out of commission. They told us about the Gerald Ford that there was a fire in the laundry room. Well, it's being repaired for 2 weeks. You're telling me that the biggest and most sophisticated U.S. carrier, which is the biggest and most expensive class of ships that we have, the Ford class carrier, you're telling me that got taken offline for 2 weeks because of a fire in the laundry room? That's not true. Simultaneously, 13 U.S. bases in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, elsewhere, Qatar, they have been taken offline. This is more damage to U.S. air bases, I believe, than any point during the Iraq War. These bases have been rendered inoperable. The damage is extensive. They're underreporting the extent of it. And they're actually putting up soldiers now in hotels because they can't stay at the bases. There was an attack at a base in Saudi Arabia that killed 13 people today. There was another attack last week. It took out 5 refueling aircraft. They're allegedly shooting aircraft out of the sky over Iranian or Iraqi airspace. So here's the question. We can't protect the strait. We can't protect our military bases. We can't protect our floating base, which is the carrier. How are we going to protect an island that's off the coast of Iran?
That's what I've been saying as well, right? You don't have the assets in place to protect the soldiers that you put on that island. And again, can you imagine what would happen if we deploy soldiers to the island and then 1 or 2 drones get through and you have 50, 100, 200 casualties, right? Could you imagine if we had to bring home 200 soldiers in body bags because we decided to put them in harm's way unnecessarily in order to occupy that island? I mean, it would be an absolute disaster. It'd be catastrophic, right? So I don't think we want to go down that route because we don't have the capabilities. Because again, we haven't been evolving, right? Russia, Ukraine has shown us for years that we should evolve and we should get up to speed on drone warfare, right? Medium range, short range drones, the small ones that you can put on a quadcopter and fly into a building. We don't have the capabilities to deter against those, right? And until we get that, we're literally sending soldiers to an island unprotected, essentially.
And the coastline of Iran is 600 miles. So you've got 600 miles of coastline from which Iranians are going to be launching fiber optic drones that can't be jammed. Literally have an unspooling fiber optic cable behind it connected to the receiver. How are you going to shoot down hundreds of drones flying at the island? How are you going to shoot down what may be Iran's most precise and advanced missiles that they haven't used yet because they're waiting to exhaust U.S. interceptors? The inevitable conclusion is that this is a suicide mission wherever we do it, whether we do it on Karg Island or whether we do it in the Strait of Hormuz. And they know that. Israel knows that. The United States knows that many soldiers are going to die. 20,000 soldiers are going in. Probably more than that are going to go in the long run. It's not going to be 200,000 yet, but it's going to be more than 20,000. There's a population on the island of 20,000. You don't think they're building IEDs? You don't think they're armed? There's a civilian population of oil workers on the island of 20,000. We're sending 20,000 soldiers in. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of casualties. And they know that. They're telling us that. They're priming the pump. That's why they're reporting it all the time. Why are they telegraphing their moves? Because they're getting the public ready. They do this. They do it all the time. They did it when we withdrew from Afghanistan in 21. They told us this story about ISIS-K and blah, blah, blah. They're doing that now. And they're telling us a lot of Americans are going to die. The Israelis are telling us Americans are going to die, but that's okay. We're okay with that. Americans are going to die. And it's questionable whether they're even going to be able to hang on to the island, because once they take it, they're going to be under heavy fire. And the Iranians know it's coming. A couple of days ago, Iran's parliamentary speaker said, we have intelligence that the U.S. is going to try to invade an island. And they said, we are going to target all the infrastructure of the Gulf country that is helping them to do it. That's either the Emirates or Saudi Arabia. They're going to be raining missiles down. They might even hit their own energy infrastructure. They might even do that. They'd rather lose it than have the United States control it. And then they'll attack desalination in the Gulf. Then they'll attack Saudi Aramco, or they'll attack desalination in Dubai. Because this is it for them. This is an existential battle for them. They either use it or they lose it. So this is how they're thinking. If they lose this war, the United States is going to take another swing at them. They have to win and impose conditions on us. They're fighting to the finish. They're not going to let the United States take control of their energy and then they're negotiate on unfavorable terms, give up their missiles, their nukes, their proxies, their oil, and wait for the United States to topple their government. They got nothing to lose. We have everything to lose. We take the island. If we win, we might bring an end to the war. If we lose and it's a suicide mission, then they're going to retaliate against Saudi energy, and it's going to be a catastrophe for us. If we take and hold the island, they might bomb their own energy and Saudi's energy, and it's a catastrophe for all of us. And what this appears to be is very similar to the first operation. It's another trap. It's another trap. We killed their supreme leader, sank their navy. We dropped 10,000 bombs on them. It's not enough. You got to do an invasion. We don't want to do an invasion. How about a small one? How about an island? Okay, I guess, we still want to win this thing. What happens when that doesn't work? Then what are you going to do? You're going to retreat. It's a sunken cost fallacy. We can't retreat now. We're too invested, so we got to go for the island. What happens when we lose the island? Well, we can't quit now. Look at how many Americans died. What happens when 1,000 Americans die and we don't take the island?
Exactly. What happens when the numbers double, triple, quadruple, Right now, it's a dozen soldiers, 24 soldiers, right? I don't even, it might be 30 now. I don't know. People are getting killed left and right, it feels like. We have hundreds of wounded, right? But what happens when you have thousands of dead? Okay. What happens when you lose 500 soldiers in a week because you can't deal with the drone warfare, right? We didn't plan properly for this. Not only is this a bad thing, the war is terrible, but we didn't plan properly for it. We don't have the assets and the capabilities to defend against the way that warfare has developed over the past couple of years, right? Drone warfare became the new standard. We don't have the capabilities to deal with it. Long range missiles, sure. Shahed drones, sure. We could take out some of those. But when you start bringing in those short range fiber optic drones, it's a whole different ballgame, right? And we see it time and time again in the war with Ukraine and Russia. We're just not ready. So Iran, they're going to do whatever they need to do. They're going to do whatever it takes, right? And I don't think it's going to end well for us.
Are we going to say, oh, well, we tried, we washed our hands of this, we lost? Does that make it more or less likely that we de-escalate? It's already impossible that we de-escalate. They're probably not even thinking about it. What happens when 1,000 Americans die? More or less likely than now. Then we're going to come in with a vengeance. Oh, they killed 1,000 Americans. Now they really got to pay. Now we need to send in 1 million troops. We need to get the Kurds and the Saudis and the Emiratis, and we need a coalition war. What happens when the UK and France deploy their only operable destroyers to the Strait and they lose them? Are they going to be involved in the war too? Is it going to be a coalition war now in Iran? This is what we're talking about. What does Israel want in the conflict? Israel wants regime change. They're not going home without it. They're having these peace talks. The U.S. and the intermediaries are threatening peace talks. What does Israel have to say about it? They say, we got to hit Iran as hard as we can in the next 2 days because peace might break out at any time. They have not let go of the dream of regime change, and they're not letting go to the people that will deliver it, which is us. They're drawing us further in. They want Americans to die. They want us to up the ante so that we get further stuck. So we have fewer and fewer off-ramps and options. And so the only possible path through is more escalation until we collapse the regime. And they will fight this war to the last American. Israel will fight their war with Iran to the last American, to the last gallon of oil, to the last barrel of oil, gallon of gas. That's what this is. Of course, Israel wants us to up the ante. The more that we have invested, the more that we've lost, the more we have to recoup. So this is where it's going, and I don't like it. It's very unpredictable. It comes down to the president. It comes down to whether this operation succeeds, and literally it could go either way. And the fate of the world hangs in the balance. If Trump can get a deal and de-escalate, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. The Antichrist and his arrival is postponed. But if we fail and Americans die, get ready for another year of $200 oil. Get ready for oil to be $200 a gallon until 2028. And whatever the knock-on effects are of that on our AI economy, there are a lot of indicators that this is not going to go the way you think it will. That is the current state of the conflict.
All right, guys, we're going to end it here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You know, Nick had a lot of great points, and he really laid it all out about how disastrous this war has been, not just for the U.S., but for the world. So thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I'm really trying to grow this community and build up this channel. So if you enjoyed it, go ahead and consider dropping a sub. That'd be really appreciated. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.